points about learning. The first point is motivation. If there is no motivation, then your students might not learn properly, right? And the second part is we want to give them all the exposure they require and all the grammar functions, all the phonology, phonetics, intonation, pronunciation, etc. That we can provide them in order to get clear messages and interactions. Okay. Today we're going to see at a very, very interesting point when learning. Okay. And but before telling you what the topic is, I want you, please, Francisco, to answer this question. Is it good to make mistakes when learning a language? What's your opinion about making mistakes, Francisco? Tell me. Do you think that it's good or it's bad or it's just normal? I want to know, Francisco. Tell me. Is it good to make mistakes when learning a language? Such a hard question. Okay. For some students, it is normal. Yeah, from some others that are very masters at the language, maybe it is not, right? It is just. Mhm. But what's your opinion, Francisco? Do you think that it's good to make mistakes or it's something bad? Or it's not both? It's just like, as you said, something normal, something that just happens. Okay, in your case, Francisco, it is good making mistakes. Why? Okay, you're typing, so I'm going to wait for your answer. Very nice. So very nice. I like the answer, Francisco. You're telling me that it's a chance to correct the students, but not only you, right? They can correct themselves sometimes. Uh-huh. Very good. It's like if you make a mistake, some people say that this is the best way of learning something, right? To make a mistake because you learn from the mistakes. Okay. But you touched a very important point, and I want to remark this in this class. You said that it's a chance to do something to correct them. Very nice. So we as teachers, obviously we need to correct mistakes, that's for sure, but it's also another chance to correct themselves. Sometimes I have students that say something and all of a sudden they realize that what they say was wrong, and then they say, no, 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 teacher, sorry, no, this is not, no, this is not she have, because she is a third person, so that means she has. So that's the point in which I am realizing that my students are learning. Obviously, it is a process, right? But at the same time, I'm thinking that they are learning, and I'm very happy to see those results. Have you ever had? It's like an intrinsical grammar. Yes, it is, definitely. It's like this grammar that they learn because they want, right? Because this is the grammar that they learn without really thinking about it that much. They just realize, they just all of a sudden the idea comes and they say, no, it was my mistake, okay, and so on. Very nice. And also, when they make mistakes, they can also be corrected by teachers, as you said. We can, this is the moment in which we can, I don't know, talk about pronunciation, about repeat grammar rules, and so on. Okay, very nice. So this is the topic of today, Francisco. This is called the role of error. The role of error. Mhm. So I'm gonna start reading and let me know in case you have questions or doubts or you have some comments. You can also share your experiences with us. Okay. Well, making mistakes plays an important and useful part in language learning because it allows learners to experiment with the language and make sure their success in communicating. Okay, as you said, Francisco. Okay, we learn with the by experimenting with the language, by playing with it. So making mistakes is good to realize, to make us make sure what we have learned. Because in something is not, you say, no, this doesn't sound good. It's because something is weird then. And then from it, you can learn a lot more, right? Okay, so I will continue. This is just to focus that is important. Now, we have three types of mistakes. Okay, so the first one is the error, which is the most common one. Okay, and I'm going to explain it to you. Learners try to say something that is beyond their current language of knowledge or language processing. In this part, students cannot correct themselves because they don't understand what is wrong. Okay, so this is mostly when they are beginners, right? So they are having a process. Let's see, today we saw present continuous. Okay, so we saw some verbs, we saw some complements, some examples with images, right? So we got some flashcards and we were explaining this. They are listening, he's talking, okay, she's watching TV, and so on. Okay, and then all of a sudden you left a practice, like you say you are going to make an exposition about what you are doing at this moment. So the students stand up and I say I, and sometimes they don't realize that most of the times they miss the verb to be. For example, they just say I is speaking instead of I am speaking. So in this case, according obviously to the language and this process of this topic, they might say only I learning English, I listening to the teacher, I speak in English, and so on. And sometimes they can correct themselves, but it's not very common because they don't have the capacity. And I'm talking about secondary students. Okay, but let's go with children, for example. When you say, what is your favorite, or yeah, what is your favorite animal? And the students say, my favorite animal is cats, dogs, and cat, dogs, and hamsters. Cat, dogs, and hamsters. So three animals. So in this case, they don't have the capacity to say no. All right, I am mentioning three animals. So that means that they are in plural. So I need to say my favorite animals are, not my favorite animal is. So this is basically the most common error. And as I told you, this is more with beginners, right? Because they are not prepared or totally prepared to do it, right? And they are minimal. As you can see, if you say, my favorite animal is dogs, cats, there is not that much problem because it's not interfering with communication. Okay, as long as you understand the message, nothing happens. All right. Now let's go with the second mistake, that is sleeps. What is about sleeps? Well, are the result of tiredness, worry, or other emotions or circumstances. We make them because we are not concentrating on what we are saying or writing. Okay, this is not very common, but it can happen, right? Sometimes you are writing something and you thought that it was perfect, and then you reread what you were writing and you say, oh my gosh, how is that I made very simple mistakes, right? And you say, come on, this is very basic. This is not even, I don't know why I made this mistake, because I thought that I have already I got a master on these kind of mistakes. You know what I mean? So, but in sometimes that happens. And why is the cause? Well, because maybe you are tired, or maybe because you are worried, or you are not concentrated. And for many students, this is this is kind of an excuse, but we should believe in this excuse. We say, no, no, that's an excuse. How is that you are tired? How is that you are worried? No, you're kidding me. But indeed, this kind of error can happen in real life. Okay, they might be tired, and that's why they are not giving their 100% of learning or willingness to learn. Mhm. And then finally, this is the most difficult one, and all teachers must be worried about this one, not because we are teachers, but because we are also learners of the language. We never stop learning, and this is fossilization. Okay, fossilization means errors which a learner does not stop making and which last for a long time, even forever, in his or her foreign language use. Okay, so this is very hard for us as teachers because we can fossilize our students. How? Let's imagine that I say agree. Do you know the verb agree, right, Francisco? Agree. So imagine agree by itself in Spanish means like estar de acuerdo, right? Agree. You don't need the verb to be. You don't need to say I am agree. No, this is incorrect. You just need to say I agree. But sometimes there are teachers, and I've heard, according to my experience, to be honest, I've heard some teachers that say, I am agree. I am on agree. I am agree. I am agree. Okay, so what is the problem? They got these fossilizations because even though you are correcting them, they continue doing it. They continue saying I am agree. So sometimes I say no, it's I agree only because agree itself it implies the verb to be and the verb. So you don't have to say I am agree. And 2 weeks later we have a talk again and the person says I am agree once again. So in this case, what I'm trying to say is that he got a fossilization. But not only that, if he transferred these fossilizations to the students, they can also get it. They can repeat for a long time or even forever, I am agree. So that's why it's very important, especially for you teachers, for you, Francisco, that you are teachers for children, to get very prepared, to be well prepared, because you can fossilize your students. You can make them to commit to make the same error once and once again. Okay, so if you have a bad pronunciation, for example, the student, the child in this case, will suffer from this problem and so on. With secondary and prepa, that doesn't happen that much. That will depend, obviously, related to the situation, but it's more common with children to start with children and continue until the adultness or maybe until be elderly or maybe forever, right? Some people die without realizing that they are making a mistake. Okay, so tell me, Francisco, so far so good about error, about sleeps, about fossilization. Tell me you have a question, a doubt. What's your opinion about this very important topic? Okay, very nice. Very, very nice, Francisco. No questions. And I hope you take into mind about making mistakes nowadays with your students. Okay. Very good. Excellent, excellent. So I will continue. This is for types and mistakes. Now, let's talk about causes of errors because from these causes, we need to find some solutions. Okay, so the first cause of errors might be interference. Okay, that means learners may use sounds patterns, lexis, or grammatical structures from their mother language to the second one. Okay, so sometimes they have this interference about their mother and the target language, right? And they think that what they are saying is correct. I had a student that he said, we were talking about verbs, and we said, how do I say recordar in English? All right, no, I didn't say that. They were, he was explaining, he was making an exposition, and then he explained something, and he said, I record, this is, and obviously everybody were laughing. Everybody was laughing, and I said, no, 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 don't laugh at him. Okay, we should help him. And I told him, no, it's not record, because record means like to type, like to how do you say that, to use your camera. And record is like remember. So he got an interference at that moment. He was thinking in Spanish, and then he thought that record is like remember. Mhm. So he made this mistake. And well, this was a little bit more Spanglish, but there are other students that use the Spanish, totally Spanish, instead of using the real English. Okay, they are, as they are talking, they might say my, I don't know, my mom, my mama, for example, instead of my mother or my mom or my mama. I don't know. Okay, you know what I mean? So sometimes they use these complete words in Spanish. Developmental error. This is when learners are unconsciously working out, organizing, and experimenting with language they have learned. But this process is not yet complete. Okay, we better call them the false beginners. Have you ever heard this term, Francisco? False beginners? False beginners. Exactly. So they think that they know a lot about a language, right? They think that they are good, they are able to communicate, but then this process is not yet complete. And they start talking, but their communication is not correct because they are missing some vocabulary, or because they are missing some, or they are lacking some of the structures, or grammar expressions. They are missing much more. More things, right? In order to get the message clear. So in this case, developmental error is basically that, right? Like they think that they know, but they don't really know. It is a process, and you as the teacher, you know, you need to put here this the prepositions. Don't forget the prepositions. Don't forget the conjugation of the verbs. Okay, so this is when, for example, the students say, "I not speak" instead of "I don't speak." Right? They just think that because they see that not, they think that not is like don't, and so on. Okay, so we need to explain once and once again all this kind of stuff. Okay, now overgeneralization. Learners apply a rule for one item of the language to another item. For example, vary your first language speakers of English, as well as English language, they often say I go it instead of I went. Okay, so for example, in this case, this is simple past. I have many students that, because you teach them the rule, the ed, that most of the verbs end with ed when they are talking about past, and they continue to say I go it instead of I went. They don't realize that this is an irregular verb, but they just follow this rule, and they think that this rule is for the all the students, right? Or for, sorry, for all the words, all the verbs. In this case, another that comes to my mind right now is the comparatives. Because you know that they use them more. For example, she's more beautiful, he's more handsome, and so on. They want to use more for everything. More easy, more hard. And then you need to explain to them when they are short, like when they have just one syllable, you just need to add er. For example, harder, uh-huh, easier, instead of more easy is easier. Or for example, the irregulars, right? Good, gooder. No, no, no. Good, better. So they overgeneralize all these rules and lexis and grammar that they know. And interlanguage. Learners' version of the second language, which they speak as they learn. When children learn their mother tongue, they seem to speak their own version of it for a while. Okay, so this is very important. Interlanguage means like they have a version of the language. Only they can self, only them, they themselves can understand themselves. Okay, I don't know how this happened, but this is very curious because they keep talking and talking, and you say, I'm sorry, I'm not understanding you. And they try to say, but they are using the same. They are using their own words. They are like creating another language, but it's because they are playing with the language. Okay, so in this case, Francisco, tell me, when a student is like somehow playing with the language, but he's making lots of mistakes, what would you do? Would you let him to continue, or would you stop him and say, no, this version of the language is not correct? What you are saying is not good at all. I know that you're playing with the language, but you should stop now. So tell me, Francisco, this is a very dilemma, right? Very big dilemma that we can get as teachers. How can we manage to I don't know, to correct our students without hurting their feelings? Okay, because that's another point, right? We correct them, but they we hurt their feelings. Uh-huh. What would you do? Okay, very nice. And you make them repeat it, right, Francisco? So that the student can realize, because you listen to them, you try to understand them, although sometimes it's very difficult, but you try to understand, then you say it, and the student repeats, right? Okay, very nice. Nice solution. Nice solution, Francisco. Uh-huh. Yes, that can be a solution. Okay. Or maybe we can give them like extra exercises, like in order to practice this word formation, like maybe with worksheets or online, or I don't know, so that they can also practice, right? Because you correct them in the class, but outside they continue talking like that, and they feel that people understand them, but it's not the truth, right? Nobody understands them. Uh-huh. So, well, we need to, this is part of our job, right? We need to get used to it. Yes, and you know why this is solutions might not be possible? Because of fossilization. Oh my gosh, you have more than I do. I don't know if congratulate you, Francisco, or say sorry because there are too many students. Very nice. Well, and you're doing your best. That's why you are doing your best in this course, because you have many children in your hands. Many children in your hands. I know it is tiring. It is tiring. But well, but well, it's part of our job, right? Okay, so very nice. So just to finish this and to have a big conclusion about this, Francisco, remember we have three general types of mistakes. Obviously, there are more, but in this case, we're just going to discuss this because those are the ones that you might be asked in the TKT test. Okay, so they are error, slips, and fossilization. Okay, so remember error, it's very common. You maybe not realize and you cannot correct yourself because you are still processing. Slaves is when you know the language, but because of distractors or external stuff, or maybe also internal for the feelings, emotions, and so on, you might make a mistake. Okay, and finally, fossilization is when you continue making the mistake once over and over again. And sometimes it can last for a long time or it can last forever. Okay, and finally, the causes of errors, well, sometimes interference, that means that your mother language, in this case Spanish, sometimes gets into your language when you are talking or when you are writing and so on. Developmental error means like the error that you make when you are processing, that this process is not yet complete. And maybe this is very common when we make the normal error, right? Okay, overgeneralization, when we think or when we have a rule, and that rule for us is for every single verb or for every single adjective and so on. Okay, because we say no, the teacher told me and so on, but no, 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 it's not like that, right? Sometimes we have exceptions. And interlanguage is when they think that they know the language and they create a version which nobody understands, which is this one is not very common, but that can happen, especially for children. They can talk and they think that people are understanding them, but indeed not. Okay, so this is basically the causes of error. These are basically the causes of error. Okay, so are you ready for doing some practice, Francisco, to activate ourselves a little bit? Are you ready for the extra exercises? Ready. Good. Now, here we have an extra exercise. Why do students make mistakes? Choose the correct term in the box below for their following descriptions. Okay, so here we have 6 descriptions. So I want you to be very attentive, please, Francisco. And we have the ones that I told you, false friend. Okay, false friends are basically, do you remember false friends when we were talking about them? These false friends have to do with interference. Huh? Do you remember about false friends? Excellent. Okay, that's why I'm telling you that this have to do with interlanguage. It's like a kind of a sub course, let's say, about interlanguage. But this is more specific. Maybe in the descriptions you have a more specific. That's why they wrote here false French. Okay, interlanguage. Now that we have already talked, L1 interference, overgeneralization, fossilization, and developmental error. When the process is not finished yet. Okay, very nice. So please, Francisco, read the descriptions and try to make your guess about what do you think is the cause or the type of error that the student is making. Okay, so I'm gonna give you 10 minutes maximum. Remember, if you finish earlier than these 10 minutes, let me know so that I can continue. Okay, 10 minutes maximum. Start now. Sorry, I didn't activate the sound. It's because sometimes because of interference, I just want to turn this off so that you don't listen to any sound outside and you can concentrate. Okay, so you're telling that number one is C. Congratulations, you did less than 4 minutes. Very nice. Okay, now, one, you said that is L1 interference. The L1 grammatical patterns is not appropriate in L2. Could be possible, yes, because in this case there is this problem in your mother language that is interfering in the second one. Okay, could be. Number two, the process in which incorrect language becomes a habit and cannot easily be correct. You're telling me that is fossilization. Very nice. I totally agree with you. Number three, an error made by a second language, which is natural part of the language learning process because they are constantly organizing and working on the language. That means that they haven't finished learning. So for you, this is developmental error. That's correct. Well, I think. Number four, they talk about the difference, for example, by saying there were three girls and two mans. You know, the mans it's irregular. So for you, this is B, interlanguage. Okay, could be that they are making generalizations, right? And well, no, you're telling that it's interlanguage, like creating a new language. So maybe in this case, Francisco, I don't know, but maybe I would change the position. No, sorry, you said that four is D. Yeah, sorry. I was looking at five. So four is D. Overgeneralization. Very good. Number five, about the learner's version. And finally, 6A. For example, librairie en français, a library in English. Okay, so let's check your answers. They look very nice, Francisco, to be honest. I don't know, maybe you have been studying a lot, but they look so nice. So these are the answers, and I think you have all of them correct. Very nice, Francisco. You understood this. Remember, you can take your notes. And very nice. Very nice. Some of them are confusing, for example, over generalization with interlanguage sometimes, right? Because you don't know about the structures and the mother language and everything, but that's okay. You got all of them right. So how do you feel, Francisco? That you get a perfect mark? That you got a perfect mark in this extra exercise? Oh, come on. You're going to make me blush my cheeks. No, thank you. Thank you, Francisco. I'm doing my best. But you too. You are doing your best too. Okay, so I hope you feel very happy for having this result. And I want the same result, or I wish I will be very grateful, very happy, very cheerful if you get the same with the sample test. Okay, that you know it is basically the most important one. Because this is like the real exam. Okay, so I'm going to read instructions and tell me if you have a doubt. For questions from 1 to 5, match the teacher's comments with the types of mistake they are talking about, listed from A to F. There is one extra option which you do not need to use. Okay, so in this case we have six options and we have only five opinions, five sentences. Okay, we have already talked about lexical slip, lexical interference error, pronunciation slip, grammatical slip. We're talking about a slip a lot. Do you remember slip? That is when you are not very in all your senses. That you are maybe distracted from external. So remember that. Lexical developmental error and fossilized grammatical error. Okay, so now these are the teacher's opinions, teacher's comments. And one more time, Francisco, you're going to have 10 minutes to do it. Let me know if you are ready, please. All right, so you start now. 10 minutes. Remember, Francisco, to look at the keywords. Sorry. In the sentences, sometimes we have keywords that helps us to know if they are talking about speaking, if they are talking about lexis, and so on. So look for those words. Good luck. Okay, very nice, Francisco. How was this? A little bit more difficult, right? Okay, so yeah, it must be difficult. If it were easy, everybody could get a TKT, right? Yeah, remember these keywords. Mhm. So for you, number one, I'm gonna check from your answers. I'm gonna give you my opinion, and then we will check to the real ones. Okay. A good student of mine said the clouds were sick and it was raining a lot, but he quickly corrected himself and say thick instead of sick. For you, that's a pronunciation slip. Sounds good. hmm Number two, I have several students in my top class who still say things like "it's very nice," "he do," "I'm doctor," "I just don't know," and what to do about it. For you, number two is letter F, fossilized grammatical error. So you might be correct because here it says my students in my top class. So that means in the highest one. So that means that they have been having this problem, this mistake from childhood maybe, and they continue in the top class. Okay, at the beginning all my students use terms like nice or good for anything positive. Then they gradually started to use language more precisely. For you, Francisco, this is E, lexical developmental error. Okay, so you think that they haven't finished their education yet, like they nice or good and they are using more and more, and obviously they are more precise, maybe they can make mistakes. Okay, because nice and good are nice, I like are like common, right, are very common, but when I use more precisely, that means that maybe they are a little bit more figurative and at the same time more difficult. Number four, during his presentations this morning, my best student was so nervous that he said, "My mother, she's coming to visit me," instead of just saying, "My mother is visiting," or "is coming to visit me," or "is visiting me," and so on, or "is visiting to me," right? Okay, just in time. Very nice. So in this case, for you, number four is letter A, lexical slip. Okay, could be, although I don't really think that this comes from lexical. I don't know. Maybe it's more like grammatical, in my opinion. But don't worry, we will check. And finally, number five, nearly all the students in the class who share the same language say brothers when they mean brothers and sisters. I don't know why. Okay, for example, they say brothers. Like for example, the word siblings. You know that siblings interferes with both, like brothers and sisters, but they continue saying brothers. So maybe in this case you're saying that it's B, lexical interference error. Okay, so according to you, their L1 is interfering in this case. Okay, so now I agree with you in the last one, but anyway, we're gonna check the answer so that we can have this clearer. Uh-huh. And they look nice. Uh-huh. So for you, number one is letter C, so you are correct. Number two, it's F, correct, Francisco. Number three, it's E, perfect. And number four, it's A. As I told you, Francisco, I was not very or totally happy for the fourth one, because in this case we're talking about grammar stuff, like we can omit the "she is" just by saying "my mother is coming to visit me," and so on. So maybe more than more than lexical, because it doesn't talk about lexis, it doesn't talk about words. If it were words, then I will say the students say I don't know, what would be the word, because it's a lexical slip, like mother instead of saying mother. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe because lexical has to do with lexis, with the words, with the meaning of the words. So in this case, I don't agree with you, and the same. This is not the answer. And finally, letter B. That is correct. So you just got one mistake. Very nice, Francisco. So yes, got it, Francisco. Very nice. So, questions or problems about this, Francisco? about the role of error? No problems, no questions, comments. Excellent, very nice. So I hope this was very clear. And remember, some of these questions might come to the real exam. Okay, very nice. And today we're gonna check another topic, which is very, very quickly also, and it's related to error indeed, because we're going to talk about this interference between L1 and L2, between the mother language and the second language. So get ready, Francisco. And this is the last topic. It's also very, very short. And this is our next topic for background to language learning. So far we have already checked motivation. We have already checked exposure and focus on form. We have checked this, the previous one, the role of error. And now, if from this role of error, there is a very important branch that is called interference that we have already talked. But this has more studies, and you need to focus more on this special error, which we're going to be treating today. Okay? So, but first of all, I'd like you to tell me, Francisco, what is the difference between L1 and L2? How much do you know about L1 and L2? Okay, number one, the target language. What is the target language? L1 or L2? L2. And you wrote the grammar. What do you mean with the grammar? That L1 has to do with the grammar? Oh, yes, both languages have different grammar. That's for sure. That's why one is called L1 and L2. Otherwise, maybe they will be named the same way. Okay, very good. I agree with you in one that you said that L2 is the target language. So then, if L2 is the target language, that means that L1 is the mother language. Okay, the most important language for people. Okay, so I'm going to start explaining about this because this is a topic that causes lots of confusion to many people, many teachers, and many students. You might say, "No, this is not that difficult," but because of context, okay? So first language L1 is the language you acquire in a familiar and social context. You are usually involved in since you are born. It's also considered the language you have a higher level with. Okay, so that means L1. Sometimes many people get confused because they say it's a mother language. Is your mother language is the language in which you are involved because of the context, because of your relatives. But let's imagine, let's just like give this extreme example that you were born in Mexico, but you have no parents, and then people from the United States, you are adopted by these people. They adopt you, and then you move to the United States, and then you grow up, you start studying, you make friends, and so on and so on and so on. So even though you, I don't know, spend 1, 2, or 3 years in Mexico, but then you move to the United States and you have lived in the United States for 10 years, that is your mother language, the English, even though you are Mexican. Why? Because this is obviously the highest, you have the highest level about this language. Not the no, it's not your second one, even though you're Mexican, because indeed you have been familiarized with. Maybe you speak a little bit of Spanish, a little, just because you remember or you have some friends. But in this case, your first language is the one in which you have the top, it's on the top of your level on language. Okay, so many people get confused about this. But obviously, in general, we can say that is a language in which you are more involved. Okay, because you were born, because your parents are Mexicans, because you have a social context inside the classrooms, outside the classrooms, and so on. Okay, and the second language is usually learned within an educational system. You are more exposed in classroom rather than a social or familiar context. Okay, and oh my gosh, here I made a mistake. Here it should be L1 2. I have just realized about this. Here it should be L2. Sorry. I'm sorry, Francisco, but anyway, I will continue. So second language, or L2, it's like that, right? So it's more for educational systems. It's more for schools and so on. And it's very confusing because some other linguistics use a foreign language. So they don't use these two. They use first language, second language, and foreign language. They make a difference between these three. But in this case, Francisco, I don't want you to get confused. In this case, according to the author we're checking and according to Cambridge TKT, we will only consider two, L1 and L2, mother language and second language. First language, second language, and that's it. Okay? Okay, and as you said, as they have different grammar, Francisco, obviously we learn L1 and L2 in different ways, context and age. Okay, so because they are not the same, so sometimes we can change our way of learning them. Okay, so I have made a chart which is very useful, and I need you to pay lots of attention to this because we're going to be contrasting. Okay, Francisco, and in any case you have a doubt, please let me know. Okay, L1 learning. Learning starts when the learner is a baby. So this is my keyword, baby. Continues through the early years of the childhood and lasts into adolescent for some kind of language skills, academic or writing. So in this point, you start when you are a baby. You start forming the sentences, you start checking lexis, pronunciation, and so on. And you continue during the childhood. Okay, that's why that's why many children don't speak very well, not totally, right, because they are still learning the language. But when they are adolescents, they are likely to use the language properly, so they don't really think that much about grammar or pronunciation because it is supposed that they have like a very nice they have their skills developed, right? They got all the skills ready to communicate with others. Okay, and obviously later on university and so on, they goes more like with more formal stuff such as academic writings and so on, essays, articles, which are a little bit more difficult, but they know the language. Okay, what is the contrast with L2? Usually starts in primary and or secondary school. It may also start or continue in adulthood. Okay, so that means that most of the times, and especially here in Mexico, the L2 learning that is in the classroom starts in primary or secondary. So in kindergarten, not many schools have English. Maybe your school does it, right, but not in many schools in the country. So in this case, obviously it is not the same. Or let's say that they start from kindergarten, but the age they enter to the kindergarten is about 3 years, 4 years. So during the 1, 2, and 3 years they are exposed to the language. And what is the language? The L1. Okay, so basically we have a disadvantage in L2 learning because it's not since the very first time they are born. Okay, it's normally inside a classroom. Okay, now let's continue. Babies learn language at the same time as their cognitive skills develop. Okay, what is this? So basically, we're talking about that they are developing their skills. Okay, they are developing. Obviously, some of them, one is more important, like speaking, for example. Sometimes they developed first speaking, or listening, and later on writing and reading, or I don't know. Okay, but basically, as long as they are learning, these are being developed. Whereas in L2 grammar, they are still developing many of their cognitive skills, but it may be more mature in secondary school. Adult learners have fully developed cognitive skills. Okay, so that means that we have a very disadvantage, because as you can see, they are developing their skills since they are babies. And in L2, it's only until secondary school. So look at all these disadvantages. 10, maybe 12 years after you are really processing the skills. Okay, and it is thought that adults can have their cognitive development skills, but in Mexico I don't think that's very true, right? Because in Mexico not many adults speak English or speak other languages. Okay, and finally, the L1 learning according to the age is that learners are motivated to learn language as they need to communicate. Okay, you know, babies say water, babies say milk, babies say sleep, because they want to communicate. Otherwise the other people won't understand them. Okay, whereas in the L2, okay, adults and some secondary learners may already have expectation about how language should be learned. So in this case, they don't really need to communicate because they have their mother language. So if they say agua, obviously they are in the context of Spanish speakers, so everybody will understand. Uh-huh. And in this case, they have expectations about how language should be learned. That means that they know how they are going to learn the language. They know about the teacher. They know that they need to learn grammatical rules. They know that they need to learn the verbs, the regular and irregular verbs. They all know about language. And in the first one, babies or children don't know about the language. They don't know how to learn a language. They are not asking, this is intrinsic or extrinsic. This is a verb. This is an adjective. They don't care. They just use the language. Okay. So far so good, Francisco. Do you have a question or a comment about this age learning, about these aspects of learning, talking about age? Exactly. Exactly. Remember, you will look at acquisition in the exposure and focus on form. Okay. For linguistics, acquisition and learning are basically the same. The only difference is that in acquisition is because they have more exposure of the language. Okay. Will you acquire a language if you have the enough exposure? Mhm. And learning is more with the explanations, with the videos, and so on. Okay, so in both, Francisco, are learning. In both, you need to learn. But as you said, acquisition is because they have more exposure, because they need it. They have an intrinsic motivation. And in the other hand, we don't have that, right? It's just a process. And obviously, as I was telling you, Francisco, we are in disadvantage. Because in L1 we all have the resources, we all have the all the things, we all have the people to talk, the materials, and so on. But in L2 it's a little bit more complicated. Okay, So far, so good, Francisco. We are almost done with this. Almost done. Okay, now we're going to continue so that we finally finish today. Okay, now another factor is the context and ways of learning. So it's not the same as I was telling you, the context and the way we're going to learn both languages. For example, in L1, be exposure to and picking up language, hearing the language around him or her all the time and learning a lot of language in chunks. For example, chunks, you know that they are like phrases that are normally used when speaking. For example, by the way, let me see, okay, and so on. All those expressions that are very common. Okay, so they are very common. So in this case, uh, as I was telling you, Francisco, we have exposure, totally exposure to the language. And in L2, okay, the exposure is not very often, and it's only for a specific language items as well as on focusing on structures. Okay, so we don't have like today we're gonna look animals and you stick the animals, the flashcards on the animals in the classroom, and you have the animals for 1 week, maybe 2 weeks, and that's it. You take them off, and then you have another topic, vegetables, and now you stick all the flashcards on vegetables in the classroom once again 1 or 2 weeks, and that's it. So there is not a real exposure, whereas in L1 maybe you don't have the flashcards, but every single time you go outside you see your pet, you know how your mom called the pet, or you go to a farm and you remember the name of some animals and so on. Or vegetables you always eat, so your mom says the names of the vegetables, the names of the food, so you have more exposure. Mhm. Now, in the next one, by wanting and needing to communicate with a strong motivation and interaction from or with their family. Okay, so in this case, we have a need to communicate, and we have a strong motivation because if we don't know how to say the things in the old one, nobody could understand us, and we might die. Maybe this is very exaggerated, but really, we can die. Okay, and this is more with the interactions first with your family first of all. Okay, the first people you talk with is with your family. Okay, now whereas in L2 it's with a strong leader or no motivation to communicate, so this will depend on these three. We can have students that are very motivated and those ones that are not motivated at all. Okay, just because they don't care and they don't have the need to communicate. Okay, so and here we were talking about interaction with the family, and in L2 it's more common to have interactions with the teacher and sometimes with classmates, and that's it. So I just speak English with my teacher and with my classmates, and that's all. I don't have the chance to practice outside. Okay, the next one, by talking about things present in their surroundings by doing things. So you speak and you see what you're speaking. Okay, because it's real. Okay, if you speak I am going to do this and then you start doing it in real life. Okay, and in this case is the opposite, often by talking about life outside in the classroom. So in this one is more present. In the L1 you're talking and the things are really happening, and in the second one you're talking but about what is happening outside, not what is really happening in the classroom. Okay, another disadvantage, right? Now, finally, by listening to and taking in language for many months before using it, which is the silent period. Okay, have you ever heard about this theory, Francisco, about the silent period? Do you know about this? Okay, how much do you know? Can you explain me? Who gave us this idea of the silent period? Or what do you remember about the silent period? Okay, the children can't speak until they are ready for speak, more or less 2 years in some cases, even more. To be honest, I have read that it can last 7 years. Obviously, this is an exaggeration, but this can happen in real life. About 2 years and then until 7 years, maybe 2 or 3 years, I have heard. Mhm. Okay, so yeah, basically, I totally agree with you. Okay, they cannot produce, but that doesn't mean that they are not able to speak. That means that they are processing. Their brain is still processing every single information. And as soon as they feel ready, they all of a sudden split out. They'll split out everything they have, everything they feel, and so on. But without any advice before, without any warning. So yeah, so this is very important because in L1 we have the silent period. But Albert Einstein, yeah, Albert Einstein, for example, I don't remember how many years he was not very intelligent indeed. He said once that he couldn't speak until 7 or 8. I don't remember. Yeah, 7, right? Yeah, I remember. And he also said that he was not good at maths at school. Okay, it is proof that he was not very smart, and now he's one of the most um, known, let's say, known scientists, right? But that's it. Okay, so the silent period is like this. So you are just listening, you are just processing the information, and all of a sudden you will speak. Whereas in L2 learning, often by needing to produce language soon after it has been taught. Okay, so in this case, Francisco, we don't have the time to think, or we do, but we pressure our students to speak because that's why the parents or that's why the school requires, right? So you say, today we're going to check about present simple, and you teach them the formulas, and you teach them this grammar structure, lexis, habits, routines, and so on. And then after a week, you said, there is a project in which you're going to introduce yourselves and you're going to tell me what you normally do in your daily life. You need to use the present simple. And the student is, oh my gosh, I have just learned 3 verbs and you want me to expose? That's it. That's real life, right? So this is the classroom learning, okay, that they need to produce what they have been taught. And in L1, there is no pressure or might not be pressure, okay? There might not be pressure. You can take your time to analyze and then produce every single thing that you are processing here, right? Okay, so, and let's go with the last chart. And it's the same. It's because I didn't want to put all this together. We're still talking about context and ways of learning. Okay, so in this case, ways of learning, these are related more with ways of learning. By playing, for example, in L1, by playing and experimenting with new language. Okay, children, that's the best way. They are experimenting with the language. They make mistakes. They play, I don't know, to la comidita or things like that, or hides and seeks, escondidas, and they are experimenting with the language. Okay, in the L2 classroom is almost the opposite, often by using language in controlled practice activities and being corrected. Okay, so sometimes in this one you don't care to about correcting your son or your daughter. Okay, you just let them be, right? Let them play. Let them, as soon as they don't bother you, you say, yeah, yeah, go and play to him or something like that, right? Okay, but in the second it is not the same, right? Because we need to control the activities, we need to give instructions. If they make a mistake, you need to correct them. So there is a huge difference. Okay, now in L1, for example, it's also by having lots of opportunities to experiment with language, as I told you. So there is lots of opportunity. And in the second one, teachers vary in the encouragement they give learners. Students may receive little individual attention from the teacher and not interact much. So in this case, in first one, in the L1, you have lots of opportunities, and in the second one not that much, because that will depend on the content or the book, or and there is no much individual attention. That's why there is no much interaction. Okay, another point of this is that, for example, by getting lots of praise and encouragement for using the language. Okay, so every single time whenever children are learning their mother language, adults are like, yes, he said his first word. So continue saying like that. Or we are always teaching the kids, like, this is called water, this is called table, and so on. And in this case, maybe the teachers usually simplify the language they use. Okay, so that means that we are not giving that much vocabulary, just the one that they need. And that's it, just the one that they need to produce. And in this one is by hearing simplified speech, which is very different. Okay, so they hear simplified speech, but they can do it bigger, they can do it better. And in this one, teachers simplify the speech, but you don't encourage sometimes your students to go beyond that, to have more. Mhm. And finally, by rarely being connected. Instead, people often reformulate what the child has said. Sorry, I think here it should be corrected, not connected. It should be corrected. So in L1 learning, yes, sometimes you are corrected, but sometimes you are not, because the adults can tell you, no, this is not correct, or say it this way, and so on. Okay, there is not like a real correction. And in the classroom, teachers are very tough. They are like devils, right, Francisco? Because we are always bothering our students, and we are always correcting them. Okay, because this is the only chance, the only opportunity to make mistakes, but at the same time to correct themselves, because they are not going to be corrected outside. Okay, so this is it. These are basically the differences between the the uh, the L1 and L2 learning that you can do, Francisco, so that you can pass your TKT, because you might have questions about this. Okay, so first, let me just summarize very quickly. Age. Okay, in age, you start with the L1 learning since you are a baby. That's it. And L2 learning, it starts when you are in primary, secondary, or even adultness. And you are still continuing developing the cognitive skills. And in L1, you are learning and you are developing at the same time. And in L2, that's not the same. Okay, you need to develop the skills until you have a very high top of the language. Okay, the next one, context and ways of learning. Basically, that most know about context is that in L1 they have more exposure to the language. That's it. They know more because they see, they watch, they touch, they feel everything in their mother language. And in L2 they don't have much interaction. They just have some little exposure in the classroom, and that's it. Mhm. And ways of learning, well, in this case, it's by experimenting, by listening, because they have more opportunities. And in L1, no, it's reduced in an amount of words, in amount of sentences, according to the content of a book, and so on. Okay, so questions or problems about this, Francisco? Doubts? Something that you'd like to tell me, something like you'd like to express to me? Okay, very nice. So let's do some practice to see if you understood properly. This is an extra practice. Okay, and with this, we will be over, Francisco. Okay, we will be finished, and I have a proposal for you and all the teachers for tomorrow. But later on, I will let you know. Okay, so number two, here are three learners. Look at the list below. Which ways do you think will help them learn English best? Okay, so all of them, I think they are L2 learners. Okay, because for example, she's from Tunisia. uh-huh this one is I don't know where he's come from. Oh, yeah, Argentina. And this person is Vietnam. So all of them are L2 learners. So you need to read their descriptions, please, Francisco, and you're going to try to choose which of these will be best for them to learn. Obviously, most of them might be repeated. Okay, so for example, for Miriam, it's not only A, maybe it will be E or H at the same time. That depends on her context, okay, or what she wants to learn English for. Okay, so please, Francisco, in 10 minutes, you will have 10 minutes to look at the context and to look at the options and try to see or to think which way will be better for them to learn. Okay, right, and let me set the timer on. Are you ready? You have 10 minutes. Are you ready, Francisco? Yes, okay, go ahead. Yes, Francisco, tell me, do you have an issue? Yes. Tell me, Francisco. Just a piece of time. What do you mean with that? Do you want to study them closely or closer? Okay. It's everything okay, Francisco? Okay, Francisco. So I will continue with the timer. Okay, good. I'm sorry, I always forget to put the um, the audio online. Okay, so as I was telling you before, you couldn't listen to me. Okay, I know that. Yeah, this is about context. Okay, you don't need to have like the perfect mark. I'll give you my opinion, and later on we're gonna check the answers proposed by Cambridge. Okay, so far we're gonna look just at these ones. For you, Miriam, it's A, B, F, and G. Okay, remember that Miriam is a beginner and she takes 3 hours a week for her course. Okay, so for you, A, watch DVDs, playing games in English, just because children like this kind of stuff, right? Songs, movies, and so on. Okay, B, using English to play games, also, right? So if you have 3 hours, I think 3 hours a week is not that much, but maybe, I don't know, maybe 1 hour per week or 30 minutes per week to do a kind of a game because they are children or she's a child at least. Okay, F, doing lots of communicative activities. Maybe, but remember that she's beginner. So maybe communication will be nice, but it's not like very forced. Okay. G, learning through interesting topics. That's definitely. I think interesting topics can be even in the three ones. Right? Now for Santiago, remember that he doesn't like English. We always have these kind of students that don't like English at all. Okay, so in this case, for this one, I will recommend all of them. No, just kidding. But according to you, it's A, B, the same. And I agree with you with playing, by playing, by listening to songs. Maybe he can be motivated, right? For you, it's also D, using website to chat online. That would be nice also. Maybe he likes computer, although it's not very contextualized, but maybe he likes it. Uh-huh. If doing those to communicative activities, maybe, but yeah, maybe he likes to communicate, and that is the way he can get the importance of English, and maybe he can be motivated, right? If he sees that he can communicate, maybe he will try to learn more English. Okay, learning through interesting topics, good, I totally agree with you. And H, chatting to foreign tourists, yeah, right, maybe as I told you, interaction with his classmates and people outside, maybe that can be good for him. Okay, and finally, wow, I don't know if that is a pronunciation, but I think it's wow. Okay, ACDE, all of them. Okay, maybe playing games in English not that much for him because he needed more for formal things because he has a new job. So maybe playing video games is a little bit informal. Listening to songs maybe too. So I wouldn't choose A in his case, but maybe I don't know. Let's see to Cambridge answers. Okay. C, doing lots of extra homework. Yes, that's for sure. Okay. And I will also add that for Miriam, in my opinion, because 3 hours is not that much. So maybe doing exercise can help her to develop more. Uh-huh. D, using the websites, definitely. He needs to be in communication with everybody. Studying grammar books, yes, but grammar books that are focused to business, for example, because remember that he's a hotel manager. Uh-huh. So maybe he will need this grammar, but about business maybe. Uh-huh. Communicative activities, nice. Interesting topics, good, and tourist also. Okay, so very nice. I agree with the majority of your answers, but let's check to Cambridge ones. Okay, very nice. For her, they say ABFG. Very nice, Francisco. You got all of them right. I totally agreed with you, with her, with Miriam. So very nice. For Santiago, you say ABDGH. Yes, that's nice. As I told you, F, not much. Maybe communicative activities, but with a purpose, right? Not that much. And you also wrote G. G, no, the G is correct. Ah, just F. Just F is the one that doesn't belong to him, according to Cambridge. Very good. And finally, you wrote a lot for him. And as I told you, in my opinion, is the same. He just needs communication. But look, Cambridge added watching DVDs. And I said that maybe for him this could be a little bit informal. But that's okay. Maybe because here it says that he hasn't studied English since secondary school. So maybe to recover again the grammar in an easy way, maybe it's recommendable to teaching with songs and so on. Okay, well, this is Cambridge, so they know how to do these things. Okay, but remember, these are possible answers. Even in the Cambridge book, it is said that they are just possible answers. So that means that you are not wrong. Me neither. That will depend with more context. Okay. Yes, Francisco, so how do you feel about these two topics? Too much information? I know. So how do you feel, Francisco? Yes, I know it's too much information to process, right? To Excellent. You can do it. I'm totally sure you can. Okay. So today's class basically was about errors. We have already checked the importance of errors, of making them. They are not bad, but we need to know what kind of error they are making so that we can correct them, so that we can I don't know, organize activities in order our students to start avoiding these errors, right? And we also, one of these errors had an important point about interference between L1 and L2. So that's why we also took this topic about these differences between L1 and L2, so that we can know how learners, let's say how people learn in their mother language in contrast to their second language. Okay, so that was today's class, and we're gonna do the sample test of this next class. So please study hard, Francisco. I'm going to be uploading some readings today about this, about L1 and L2, about some researchers, about the silent period. So I hope you have the time to read them. And tomorrow we're going to do the sample test, and we're going to look at another topic. Okay, very nice. And why I am telling you about